Hi, I'm Linda Camp, owner of Sunday Best Quilt Works in Ellerslie, Georgia. I love old, complicated, wonderful blocks like the Caesar's Crown, but it can be a little tricky to piece. There are over 50 pieces in every block, so we developed an acrylic template set to make rotary cutting fast and simple, and we hope you love it. The first thing we're going to do is spray starch with Best Press. When you're working with curves, everything is on the bias, and we want to stabilize that fabric before we start to cut. So a few minutes at your ironing board will be time well spent. Okay, there we are. Now we're ready to cut. Alright, we're going to start cutting our Caesar's Crown using a rotating mat. We have sandpaper dots on our template to keep it from sliding. A good sharp blade in the rotary cutter. I've got my fabric wrong side up. That will make it easier for me to do the marking. We use the little holes that are in the bits of your template to make our positioning dots. That way everything lines up perfectly the first time, no guesswork involved. Okay, my template A is cut. Being wrong side up, I'm now ready to take a Pigma pen and start marking my positioning dots. Now you may be thinking that a Pigma pen is the wrong thing to use because it's permanent, and that's true, but it fits nicely in the holes and it's going to be in the seam allowance, so it won't show, but it can be seen on almost any fabric you choose to use. Now we're going to lay this part aside and move on to the next step. Melon B. Again, we're cutting with the wrong side of the fabric up. This will make it easier to mark our positioning dots. I've got 4 layers stacked together so that I'm cutting efficiently. I need 4 units, and I have 4 units. Alright, I'm going to mark my positioning dots on the front and the back. There is a slightly more shallow side to the melon and a slightly deeper curve to the melon. We want to be careful when we place them against the center unit A to make sure that the more shallow curve goes toward the center and the deeper curve goes toward the outside. The reason for that is the deeper curve will work better when we get to sewing the rings around our melon. Okay, and being wrong sides up, it's fairly quick and easy to separate the units and mark the dots. Alright, that takes care of units A and B. Moving on to C and D. We've cut 2 strips from the 18-inch side of our fat quarter, and I've doubled them so that we have 4 layers. We're going to need 8 units each of C and D. I'm going to cut D first because it's the tallest unit. By pre-cutting your strips, it speeds things up and you have a lot less waste. Okay, that's 4. We'll scoop the template against that cut edge, turn the mat, and we have 8D ready to roll. Now we'll cut the C. We're going to have a little bit more fabric waste here, but I really don't mind because of what we gain in speed. And the template set is all about being able to make this block more quickly and easily. Okay, for C, 8C. Okay, we'll lay those aside. I'm going to use my mat cleaner to get all the nibbly bits out of the way. There we go. All right, next we're going to cut template E. This forms the first ring that goes around our center unit. Again, I've got 4 layers stacked. If you're timid and afraid of making a mistake, you can do it 2 layers at the time, but this is just much more efficient. Okay, there we are, 4 of those. One of the benefits of our template set is that the corners are nipped off, so that when we start construction, very little pinning is required. Everything fits together and looks just the way it's supposed to without anything hanging over. The only dog ears we have come when we start piecing the outer ring, but those are easy to deal with. All right, now we've cut everything up to the outer ring. We're now going to have our 4 layers of fabric. Again, wrong side up, right side up, it won't matter on this one. We need 8 pieces of this unit to form the outer ring. All of the outer rings are done in units of 8. 8F, 8E, 8C, and 8D. There we go, almost there. The sandpaper dots are a real help when you cut this many layers at one time. All right, the next thing we need to cut will be the outside setting unit G. Now, if you didn't care about conserving fabric, you could cut 4 layers at one time. We need 1/3 of a yard per block when we get to this unit. And I happen to like saving the parts and pieces. I don't like to have a lot of waste. I'm not going to be marking the positioning dots on this unit because we found that the seam intersections are the perfect way to line things up. So marking the dots at this point would be redundant. We're going to need 8, and again on this one I'm cutting wrong sides up and right sides together. When we get to the sewing machine, all we have to do is chain these units through, and they're already lined up and don't have to be turned around. Let me get these out of the way. That's 6. These 2 will be the 8, and we'll be done cutting. Get this scrap out of the way. And there we are. Our Caesar's crown block is fully cut. Now I'm going to lay it out on the mat to show you how it's going to fit together. Our center A, our melons B, there we go. Then our inner ring is E, E, will go on either side of C. C will line up with the point of our center unit here. I'm not going to lay out the whole thing, just give you an idea of how we're going to look when it's all sewn together. Alright, this will fit here. This will fit here. We're going to bounce back in with unit D, and it's going to look like this. If you turn it just right, it'll look like that. And then after these units are joined together with a center seam, this will form your corner, and it will look very much like this. Very striking block. Alright, I have my melon laid out with the least curve to the top and the deepest curve to the bottom. I'm going to put these two pieces together, right sides, and I'm going to match my positioning dot, putting my pin in the center, finding the positioning dot on the back, and pulling that up, and I'm going to pull this pin down. I always want my fabric to be deepest curve on top. When we talk about concave and convex curves, it gets really confusing, but you can always remember smiley face on top. The deepest curve always goes on top, and the curved melon always goes on the bottom. I'm using only 3 pins, and I do a little bit of a double pin on my outside edges just to make sure that my control is exactly where I want it to be. Alright, I have my 3 pins in place. Now I'm going to put it under my 1/4 inch foot, and I use a wooden stiletto. A wooden stiletto is a wonderful tool. I'm rolling my needle down and catching my fabric and removing my first pin. I'm going to use my stiletto to get my edges to line up together, and I'm going to use my stiletto to hold them in place as I stitch. I'm going to stitch as far as my fingers and drop my needle. If you run up on a wrinkle, the way to deal with it is to lift your presser foot, pull your fabric to the back and to the left, and realign those edges. So everything looks pretty smooth. I'm once again going to stitch down to about the space of my stiletto. I'm beginning to get a little bit of a wrinkle here, so we're going to deal with it before we creep up on it. We're going to push the fabric to the back and to the left, and it pulls these edges right together down here where you want them. No wrinkles. People are terrified of curves, but there's really nothing to it. This is an easy peasy process. If you take your time and don't get in a hurry, you can do some amazing looking blocks. Really impresses people, but nothing to it. Just remember that the fullness always goes to the back and to the left. And if you start to creep up on a wrinkle, it's okay for your wrinkle to be back here on this side of the presser foot as long as your edges are together here on this side. Alright, tad bit of fullness right there where the stiletto's pointing. I'm going to push it to the back and to the left. It pulls these edges down together, and we're done. Alright, let's take it out of the machine and take a look at it. There we go. Not a wrinkle in sight. We're ready to press. Alright, I always press from the front, never from the back. I'm using my little Steady Betty pressing mat because most of the areas that I'll be pressing today are fairly small, and I'm letting the heat and the weight of the iron do the job. You want to avoid the rainbow motion because we don't want to stretch those bias edges. We just want to let the edge of the iron slide over the seam allowance. Our edges will be pushed away from the center of our block, and we'll repeat this motion 3 more times. Then our center will be complete. Alright, the first ring is formed by joining the C units to the E units, and because the ends are nipped off, everything fits perfectly, so I really don't worry about pinning at this point. I'm just running them through the machine and chain piecing right sides together. This is part of the process that makes things a little bit faster. I apologize that it takes so long to sew these together. It's a little bit like watching grass grow when you sit and watch somebody sew for a few minutes, but you'll see how they're constructed and how easily it goes together. All right, this is the first set of C and E. Now it's very efficient just to pull D and F over and also run them through with chain piecing before we go to the ironing surface. So here I'm going to line them up and they're a perfect fit. This will be the only place we have a little bit of a dog ear. After these units are seamed and joined together, we will have a bit of a dog ear trimmed down. Now I'm going to move these over to the ironing surface and get them out of the way and continue on piecing D's and F's. This forms the outer ring of the Caesar's crown block. Everything just lays together perfectly. This is where your 1/4-inch foot becomes important. You can always be guaranteed that this is going to work if your 1/4-inch seam is accurate. Our pattern includes the pressing directions, and if you follow them carefully, everything will nest together perfectly. You will have opposing seam allowances, and again, that makes everything just fit together the way it's supposed to. All right, now we're ready to go to the pressing surface. Okay, we want to first set our seam, and again, we're pressing from the front. I've left them chained together to make them easier to handle, and I am just pressing toward the small red unit. I want all of my seam allowances to fall in the direction of set C. Set my seams. Press toward the red. All right. Now I'm going to clip my threads. Clip these, and I'll be ready to press the next section. Okay, on this section, D and F, I've got wrong sides up, largest piece on top. Your seam will always fall in the direction of the unit that's on top. And in this case, I want it to fall away from my red so that when I join the two rings together, I'll have opposing seam allowances. There we go. Get those clipped apart. Pull the next ones over. Set the seam and press towards the ring. Okay. wear my scissors around my neck just to keep it convenient. That way I can always know where they're at. Okay, we're ready to go back to the sewing machine now and continue joining units together. Okay, now we're going to join these units together in pairs. Not terribly interesting to watch somebody do this, but this is how we get the job done quickly. Okay, and because I have the other units partially joined, I'm just going to continue chaining those together as I go through. Alright, here's where you'll begin to see a little bit of overhang at the top. This is where our only dog ear comes in. I'll match the points where it overhangs and the bottom. And I'll know that everything is perfectly lined up that way. There we are. One more, and then we're almost halfway there. Okay, now I'll go back to the pressing surface, but I won't make you watch me. Alright, now we're going to join those pairs together, and we simply repeat the process over and over until we form the complete ring. Each time we're pressing from the front, we're going to get opposing seam allowances. You can see how this unit goes toward the red center. This unit goes away. And if we continue doing what we're doing, we will have made 2 complete rings and be ready to join those together. All right. Now I'll finish the first ring and join it to the center unit. Alright, we want our intersections to line up perfectly, so I'm coming down about 3 threads on this side of my seam allowance and about 3 threads down on the opposing side of my seam allowance. I'm going to pull that down as my positioning pin, and I'm going to pin about 1/8 of an inch on either side. That's going to absolutely lock our intersection together so that it won't move as we're stitching, and then I repeat the process here. Get my edges even, push my positioning pin down, and then pin on either side. Alright, now we're going to move on to the center unit. I'm going to find the approximate center here, find my dot that was the center of my melon here, pull my positioning pin down, and pin that in place as well. Now our goal is to, again, basically use only 3 pins. We're going to sew from this unit to here, working our fullness to the back and to the left, and then we will sew from here to here, and we'll repeat it through each section of the unit.
Perfect. Start.
Okay, I've dropped my needle down to hold it in place. I'm stitching through the first 2 pins, removing those, and I'm going to use my stiletto to keep my edges together. Drop my needle, check to see where my fullness is. If there's a bit of a wrinkle, it gets pushed to the back and to the left. Alright, I'm good to go down to the next seam. I'm going to stop, remove the pin, lift my presser foot, realign the edges, hold everything in place, and stitch my way through to the next pin. When we approach a wrinkle, again, moving your work to the back and to the left, use the stiletto to keep your edges together, and here we go. It's a little bit fiddly, but absolutely worth the time and trouble to get a perfect unit with no wrinkles. Okay, made it through that intersection. Here we go, coming through the next one. Now, some of you may need to remove your pins before you get there. We're all taught not to sew over our pins. And then there's the rebel who breaks the rules. I don't want my intersection to move when I'm coming towards it, so I do tend to sew over my pins. Every now and then I hit one and regret it. But we just work our way from one pinned unit to the next pinned unit. It's the same process each time. If you creep up on fullness, it goes to the back and to the left, keeping our edges even on the deepest part of the curve. Here we go. Okay, it looks like we got a little bit of a wrinkle here in our red. We're going to work it out. We're going to push it to the back, pull it a little bit to the front, no wrinkle. There we go. Pull our pins out, get our edges together. Needle down so everything stays in place. Okay. The stiletto is a really good tool to help you control these edges. I didn't always use one. I tried to use large pins and seam rippers, but a bamboo stiletto is definitely my preference. A lot of girls use the plastic purple thing, but the only good use I've found for it is to clean the grout in my shower. I put a little bit of quilt batting over the tip of it, dip it in cleanser, and the purple thing works great for that, but I don't enjoy it when I'm sewing. I do love the feel of the bamboo stiletto in my hand. And we're almost there. Creeping up on the last wrinkle perhaps, pushing it to the back and to the left. And here we go. And there we are. We have stitched our way all the way around. Let's see how it looks. There we go. I started to say not a wrinkle in sight, but I have a wrinkle and I'll have to fix it. Okay, I used my seam ripper to remove the offending stitches, and I'm going to put the work back into the machine. I'm leaving a little bit of a gap here so that I have room to manipulate the fullness. Start stitching about a ½ an inch back behind my stitches I've already taken, and let's see if we can do better this time. Okay, the fullness seems to be in the bottom and not the top. I might have to remove a few more stitches here, so let me get those out. Let's see what happens. All right, I am manipulating the fullness on the bottom. Stitched my way back through it. Now let's take a look. There we go. That got it. No problem. Now we'll press. All right. Again, we're going to iron from the top. We're going to push our heat and weight of the iron over that seam allowance and hold for about a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn the work. Push it, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. our seam allowance will automatically fall in that direction. If it doesn't, you can feel it with your fingers underneath. Make sure you lay it, tongue got in the way. Make sure you lay it down so that your seam allowance is facing away from the center. Put your iron on it. Feel a little bit of resistance. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Work your way around the circle. A little bit of resistance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks pretty good. Alright, we cut unit G with right sides together. So all I had to do was drop a couple of pins in this one. I pinned it, even though it is accurately cut, I didn't want it to slip and slide. So I dropped a few pins in to make sure that our finishing touch winds up being just as accurate as everything else has been. And again, I'm chain piecing, removing my pins. And these are going to form the 4 corners that will frame our circle, our Caesar's crown. This is one place where I'm going to press my seam allowances open, simply because it relieves a little bit of the bulk after it's sewn, and it gives you a really accurate line to line up your points so that your Caesar's crown points meet your seam allowances perfectly with very little bulk. Okay, I'm ready to go to the ironing board on these, and before I do it, I think I will go ahead, cut these apart, and go ahead and join my units together, and then I can do all my ironing at one time. So we want this to open up. That's one corner unit. I'm going to open this one up as well. Make sure the alignment is correct, and sew these 2 parts together. Okay, I'll open this one up and this one. Make sure my alignment is correct and sew these 2 together. Whoops. All right, I've got 2 halves ready. I will join those together. And then our block will be ready for its final seam. Okay, let me just pull this one around, right sides together. And while it's in the machine, I will get this one as well, and then we'll press. Well, there we go. Get it lined up just right. And done. All right, I'm going to use my stiletto to help open that seam allowance up a little bit. Press it and work my way around the unit until I've pressed all of my seam allowances open. For most of our quilting, we press things to the side, but on this one, I like to press it open just because it relieves the bulk a tad bit. There we go. Watching somebody press is almost as boring as watching somebody sew. I'll be through in just a second. All right, that did it. Now we're ready to join this unit to our circle. Let me show you what it's going to look like. Getting pretty. There we go. Okay, the first pin I place is the one where my center unit lines up with one of my points, and it's going to be square. To make sure that my units meet, I use my positioning pin at the point on the back and have it come through on the pressed open seam, and I pin that. Then I will go to the next unit. You find the center where the threads cross on the point, find my seam, use my positioning pin, and pin that in place. This way, everything lines up absolutely perfectly, and our Caesar's crown is always facing in the right direction. There we go. All right, our Caesar's crown block turned out looking pretty good. Our points are lined up with the bars on the Caesar's crown so that it'll be straight. If you had put it on point, you would want this unit to be pointed towards your corners, but that keeps all of your blocks consistent and looking pretty. With our template set, some sandpaper dots, a stiletto, and a few glass head pins, and a little bit of patience, you can do a wonderful job. People are terrified of curves, but you just watched me do curve after curve after curve, and it's easy. It's really easy. Our template set makes it very doable and very accurate.